but will the glory go to others? At 31, he suddenly finds himself out of work. His guerrilla radio tactics have won him few friends. And some question whether Stern's shock radio has staying power.
Everything I do on the air has consequences. When you go on and do lesbian dating game, when you gargle body fluids on the air, there are real consequences. I wasn't financially secure. I knew they probably were going to fire me. But at the same point, I wanted to entertain my audience.
In 1985, the consequence for Stern is his job. Even though he has just won WNBC the best afternoon ratings in its history, he is called in for an early meeting and fired. In a 1993 Dateline profile, Stern recalls the events of that day.
This is certainly weird to be back here because when I was fired, they made me just get out of the building and they only let me take one cardboard box with me. So I remember walking through these halls feeling like a real jerk because I have all my possessions in this one little cardboard box. I remember I went out that door and all of a sudden I'm standing on the street with my cardboard boxes and I have no ride home.
But Howard is not out of work for long. Almost immediately, he's offered another, better job. K-Rock is a struggling FM station whose owner, Mel Karmazin of Infinity Broadcasting, is willing to shell out big bucks for a proven franchise.
Howard was a very successful program on WNBC, generating a great deal of audience, great deal of revenue, liked both of those things, and as soon as the opportunity presented itself, we hired him.
Within weeks, Howard is back on the air, in the same time slot and in the same market, at a station where he is to spend the next 2 decades. The only difference, a hefty pay raise. In 1985, he's earning an estimated $500,000 a year, making him one of the top-paid DJs in America. Getting fired by WNBC turns out to be a terrific career move. At K-Rock, Howard continues his climb to the top of the New York ratings, and his on-air antics just get wilder.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Stern's off-the-wall behavior leads to his show being syndicated in Philadelphia in 1986. But the airing in Philadelphia will be the beginning of what is to become a desperate battle. The FCC, in charge of policing the airwaves for obscenity, receives more complaints in 3 months in Philadelphia than it has in New York in 3 years.
It's a very slippery slope when one tries to say, is this done in a patently offensive manner? Because clearly sex and excretory matters are being discussed on television daily.
The FCC decides to launch an investigation to monitor Stern. During an infamous Christmas party broadcast comes the final straw. A guest allegedly plays the piano on air with his penis.
Here he goes, Robin.
He's ready.
Uh-oh, with his private party.
Is he doing it?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We're going to hell.
It is the end of the go-go 80s, and a conservative wind is blowing in Washington. Howard argues that much more offensive fare can be found on the news and in real life.
Priests raping young boys. That is really offensive. The government wasting millions of dollars on screwdrivers. And I mean, there are so many things that I find offensive. People murdering each other, that to me is offensive.
But the FCC doesn't agree. On November 29, 1990, the FCC fines Infinity $6,000. It is to be the beginning of a protracted legal battle that will cost Stern and Infinity millions, and a battle that will only intensify as Howard makes his foray into a new medium. By 1990, 36-year-old Howard Stern is being heard in 3 major markets and has 800,000 devoted fans. But that's not enough. Howard wants more. And there's one medium he has not yet conquered.
Please welcome now America's most beloved radio personality, Howard Stern.
Television. From his earliest TV appearances, like this one in 1984, an ambitious Howard has been studying the medium.
This is the most uptight show I've ever been on.
Oh, I see.
So this will probably be my last appearance.
And on July 14th, 1990, he finally gets his own show. WWOR, a cable TV superstation, launches the Howard Stern Show in national syndication. It is not for everyone. The show includes skits featuring Stern in blackface and real homeless people in a parody called Homeless Howie Weird Squares. It gets good ratings, but it is not carried in enough markets to attract major advertisers. In 1992, WOR pulls the plug. But not before the whole world gets to see more of Stern than they probably expected at his 1992 MTV Music Awards appearance.
I am Fartman. They had me 50 feet in the air coming down. I was scared. I was going to fly in as Fartman, this great character, and show my butt cheeks, because I knew my butt cheeks were funny.
Critics disagree, but who cares about critics when you have ratings like Howard's? His television appearances swell his radio audience by an astonishing 700%. In 2 years, his radio show goes from being broadcast in 3 major markets to 9. The lonely boy who once produced imaginary radio programs in his basement is now being heard by a dizzying 7 million people every week. Coming up, the rude mouth of radio sets out to become the king of all media.
Well, I was invited, that's why I came.
By 1992, Howard Stern's first TV show has been canceled,
Howard Stern.
but his television appearances have swelled his radio audience by an astonishing 700%. In 2 years, his radio show goes from being broadcast in 3 major markets to 9. These numbers are irresistible to a small up-and-coming cable network called the Entertainment Channel. In 1992, E! Launches The Howard Stern Interview, which will eventually turn into the Howard Stern Radio Show, still on to this day.
Howard is interesting as an interviewer because he gets it in his head what he wants to talk to you about, and that's where he's going, and there are no holds barred.
And by some strange alchemy or magnetism, he seems to hypnotize his guests so they come out with the most outrageous admissions that about their sexual history or some family secret.
Howard is very persistent. You know, if you try to avoid a question, he'll go right back to it. You know, he'll just like dig until he gets you to talk about whatever it is he wants to find out about you.
Stern becomes the top-rated program on E! But his good ratings only intensify his ongoing feud with the FCC.
God, if you are telling me that a duty joke is going to send the United States government into a tizzy, you would laugh. It has. It has sent them into a tizzy. They're absolutely insane over me because of a duty joke.
In fact, the words the government finds offensive concern a lewd reference to Aunt Jemima and a derogatory mention of Pee Wee Herman. And even Howard Stern is no longer laughing when he learns how much they will cost his employer, Infinity Broadcasting. The FCC levies fines that eventually amount to $1.7 million. But Infinity is not supporting Howard just because they believe in freedom of speech.
We charge more money for advertising in Howard's show than has ever in the history of radio been charged for a morning radio program.
Without admitting wrongdoing, Infinity pays the $1.7 million, and the FCC drops its investigation. Despite the fines, or perhaps because of them, the Howard Stern juggernaut is only gathering steam. In October 1993, Stern takes on yet another medium. He publishes his autobiography, Private Parts. It sells 750,000 copies in the first week.
New York City police were needed to control fans at a bookstore where Stern was signing copies of his controversial book, Private Parts.
10,000 fans turn up for an autograph signing in New York. No book in history has ever sold this fast. For Howard, it's a vindication. And as the television cameras pan the long lines at the bookstores, it becomes clear for the first time that Stern's audience goes beyond the young white male demographic he's been identified with. Some fans are afraid Howard will go mainstream. In his New Year's Eve pay-per-view special, he allays their fears. The show makes $16 million in one night, more than any pay-per-view ever. Stern is becoming a one-man industry. But Howard's shows are becoming more and more, frankly, sexual.
He had a girl who said for breast implants, she would sleep with an animal. And Howard wanted to know if I would allow Spike, my dog, to sleep with her. And everyone was shocked. But I thought, what a treat for Spike.
In the early days of K-Rock, there was much talk, but little action. Now, there are naked women running around the studio almost daily.
Why don't you pull off your panties so that I can see if you match?
One listener who is having a growing problem with all this is Howard's wife, Allison. To the world, she puts on a bold front, but privately, she is becoming concerned.
My wife does drive in a car with her friends and has to turn off the radio, and she gets a hold of me at home, and she does yell at me.
Each day, the show seems to get steamier.
You're not wearing panties, are you?
No. But for all the on-air flirtation, Howard remains faithful and fiercely loyal to his wife.
This is a friend who has stood by me. My wife has been incredible to me. She traveled the country with me. Certainly you saw me at 20, and as goofy as I look now, I was a lot worse then.
He was very proud of the fact that the marriage had lasted, that they had come from nowhere and built together. And he didn't forget that when he was that jerko geeko on campus, she liked him.
Howard's image of, I am a guy that loves to talk about women's breasts, but I am also married and kids at home, and therefore I can't, was definitely a big attraction.
He acted as a kind